In that first year that you were there, and you're the GM, you go, you do your thing, you leave. But there was various WCW guys who some people would say were buried by Triple H. I'm not saying that. Watch the show. But like there was opinions that was what happened. You know, Scott Steiner came in, it very quickly petered out. Booker T at WrestleMania 19, where it took 23 seconds to pin him after a pedigree. Goldberg. Did you get a sense when you were there, not for you, but when WCW, ex-WCW wrestlers would be there, that there was just a different vibe of...
Yep. And it's real. It was real. I think it starts with, again, everything that you see, read, smell, feel, sense about WWE all emanates from Vince McMahon. And it works its way down to the product. And it's not that Vince was against anybody in WCW or was resentful or thought less of them. In Vince's mind, and he's a very peculiar cat, and I can give you 9 billion reasons why I think it's a good thing, but he was so protective of his brand. WWE was his brand. It was as important to him, and is as important to him probably to this day, as any member of his family. And he always wanted his brand to prevail and be more important, to be more sophisticated, to be better than anything that challenged it. And I think that kind of filtered down into the way that he treated WCW talent. Or any talent that didn't come up through the WWE system.
The two in particular, Booker T had a really big rise in 2002. He was doing really well. He was very popular. And then Goldberg, who they brought in, and you had worked with both of them. With Goldberg, you created all the stuff that he did. What did you think when these guys were kind of there? They're on Raw. They're on the brand that you're working on. And you know their potential or what you could do with these performers, and they're just not able to do it.
I didn't think about it a whole lot because it wasn't my concern. One of the great things about not being involved in creative is you don't have to think about it like that. But knowing them personally, I was more interested in how they were going to be able to handle it than anything else. You know, because when you go to WWE, you have to adapt. You know, Chris Jericho told me once, a couple years ago, we were talking about this. Chris Jericho was in WCW. I kind of gave him his first national opportunity. He'd been around, he'd been doing things before. Don't get me wrong. I didn't find him in a back alley and said, "Hey, you should be a wrestler, kid." He'd been doing pretty well, and he was a very talented young man when I first saw him and brought him into WCW. But Chris, when he was very young, early in WCW, and came up with a lot of his own ideas, and he was very talented, very creative, really came up with some good. Chris wanted more than he was able to achieve in his mind in WCW. And he was right, by the way, because we had Sting, we had Hulk, we had Luger, we had Goldberg, you know, we had Roddy Piper, we had Randy Savage. You have all this major talent at the top. And Chris Jericho was somewhere in the middle, maybe lower third of the middle, or top third of the middle of the roster. And Chris decided he was going to go to WWE, and he did, obviously, and he became very successful there. But he told me, this is like 2 years ago, we were talking about this, and he said, "You know, Eric, it's funny, when I left WCW and I came to WWE, I was convinced I was ready for the main event." He said, after spending 30 days in WWE, I realized how much I had to learn. There's a it's just different. It's a different style of wrestling. It's a different demand on you as a performer. Your ability to work the camera during the course of a match was way more challenging in WWE than it had been in WCW. So there was still a lot to learn, and a lot to learn in terms of psychology. As great as WCW was in 96 and 97 and 98, we were great for a lot of reasons, but not because we were that sophisticated in the ring. Whereas in WWE, there's a lot of pressure on you to perform in the ring. Not in terms of what we see today, which is like watching Olympic gymnastics, but in terms of psychology and storytelling, using your face And it's one thing that I never thought about until I worked in WWE and I was up in a gorilla position and standing next to Vince or sitting next to Vince in some cases and listening to him direct talent is your face is 80% of your character. Yeah, you gotta have a good body, you've gotta be able to wrestle in the ring, all that is a given. But this is what sells emotion. And that's something that I had never thought about or heard about until I went to work for WWE. So I was interested in seeing how Scott Steiner, Bill Goldberg, especially Bill Goldberg, because he's a lunatic. And by the way, Scott Steiner is not the most sane person you've ever worked with either.
But I mean, you know, because you worked with Goldberg a lot. Obviously, there was a lot of stories about he wasn't that keen about going to WWE. He didn't look that keen when he was there. From your just interactions with him when you guys were both in WWE, was he the same Goldberg mentally to you that he was when he worked for you?
No, I think when Bill came to WCW, I first met Bill at a strip club. He was out with a couple buddies, and Bill was very friendly with Sting and Lex Luger. He worked out at their gym. Sting and Lex Luger owned a gym together called Main Event Fitness, and Bill worked out with them. So Bill knew them. Lex and Sting both said, "Hey, man," because Bill had been in American football, the NFL. He played for the Atlanta Falcons. He was a pro football player, but he got hurt and he got cut, and he was looking for something to do. So somebody, I don't know who it was, set it up and said, "Hey, why don't you come and meet Bill at this club?" And I went and I met with him and I talked to him. We had a beer. And he was pretty open-minded. He was somewhat excited, but he was tentative. He came in to WCW. We finally agreed, and that's another story. Bill wanted to come to work for WCW. I was going to put him in the power plant, which was our training facility, kind of like NXT, right? And I was going to pay him $75,000 a year, which for a guy that was playing in the NFL was not a lot of money, right? But I was going to treat him just like everybody else. And after I met Bill that night, I was interested in him, but not like I was like, "Oh, this guy's going to change the world." I pretty much treated him like I treated everybody at that time, which was not good or bad, but on my list of 25 things to do every day, Bill was down around 23, 24. So it took me forever to finally offer him a deal on paper, offer him his contract. And when I finally did, he came in, we sent him into the power plant, and he had to learn basics. He knew nothing about professional wrestling, zero. He had gone from an elite athlete, a professional NFL football player, to learning how to tie his shoes in professional wrestling. He literally didn't know how to put on a pair of wrestling boots. So Bill was somewhat insecure. And it was an issue for him. I mean, to go from being an elite professional athlete in the NFL to being a rookie in professional wrestling, making $75,000 a year and not feeling very confident in yourself was kind of a big transition for him. But he got through it, and then we put him out on TV in what we call dark matches. A dark match is you're set up, you know you're going to do a live TV show. The show doesn't start till 8 o'clock. The crowd starts coming in about 6. So that's a great opportunity to take people that are training and learning and put them out in front of people, not many people, not a full house because they're just starting to show up. There's 300, 400, 500 people there and they're kind of scattered around or eating hot dogs or eating popcorn, drinking beer, whatever. And you put out this match with people that they don't even know who they are. These are people that are training. And Bill would come through that crowd and he'd snort fire and he came through and the crowd, usually a dark crowd, they hardly ever paid attention because they knew what it was. When Bill came out, those 300 or 400 people, whatever it was, like it, threw their hot dogs down, set their beer aside and went, "Holy who's this guy?" And we knew very quickly that Bill had this extra special something. It was his look, it was his energy, it's charisma. It's that one intangible thing. You can't build it, you can't buy it, you can't sell it, you can't put it in a cup of coffee. It's just this gift that you're probably born with or not. And Bill had immense quantities of it, and we saw that right away. So as a result of that, whereas Bill should have spent a year or 18 months in a training facility, we went, F it, let's put him on TV. And like somebody would say, yeah, but he only knows 3 moves. He can't, you can only put him out there for 2 or 3 minutes and he runs out of shit he can do. All right, then let's put him out there on TV and he'll squash everybody with the 3 moves he knows how to do and he'll leave. And that's how Bill Goldberg became Bill Goldberg. That's why he went to 179-0, because he didn't know how to have a match. The only thing he could do was come out, breathe smoke, inhale smoke coming through the entrance, snort it out his nose like a cartoon character, walk to the ring in the middle of a bunch of fireworks that almost set him on fire, get into the ring, the bell would ring, he'd have a match that would last about 90 seconds and he'd go back. That's the only thing that Bill knew. So when Bill got to WWE, you can't imagine how insecure Bill was. He was more of a puppy there. He was trying hard to make it work. To answer your question, he was a much different personality.
So one thing I want to ask you about was, just from your perspective, what you saw. Your time as GM kind of coincides with when people saw Triple H at his most offensive as a character. The Triple H reign of doom is what they call the 2002 to 2005 period of him being world champion and being all over the show and the long promos that went on and on and on. When you were there...
And he fucked a corpse.
That is a bigger
He was
sin.
into necrophilia. I mean, I'm not it was pretty weird. And Vince was standing there going, I want you to pretend you love it. I want you to grab that corpse, pull that, crawl over the top of that corpse, and that dead person. That's how weird Vince could be. I'm not lying. You can go back and watch. No, you probably can't watch it. They probably sanitize it. It probably doesn't exist. But it was an actual scene on Monday Night Raw.
So his son-in-law, when Triple H was there, did you get a sense, just being kind of on the show every week, that the feedback you were getting from the audience and stuff, that people were tired of him? How did he seem to you as a performer when you were there?
This isn't going to do me any good at all. But...
It's your last show. It's your last tour.
So I might as well go down in flames and kiss my future goodbye. I always had a lot of, Paul Levesque worked for me. I hired him for $75,000 a year because he was brand new to the business. And Triple H will tell you the story. When he called me and we were talking about bringing him into WCW, at that time, my focus was on cutting costs. This was well before Nitro, well before a lot of things, well before Hulk Hogan, all that. And I think it was Terry Taylor, somebody, was very positive about Triple H, Paul Levesque at the time, and showed me his tapes. I said, okay, I'll give him a call. I'll consider bringing him in. And he lived in Connecticut or New Hampshire, somewhere up in the Northeast, and we were based in Atlanta. And I was trying hard to reduce the number of talent that I had to fly in every week, because one of the biggest expenses that WCW had was travel expenses. So I was trying really hard to narrow our roster down to people that lived within driving distance. So I'm on the phone with Paul, and I said, Paul, look, we'd love to bring you in, but you're a gud. He said, a silence. A gud? I said, yeah, you're a gud. You are geographically undesirable. So if you want to move yourself to Atlanta, I'll give you a shot. But I'm not flying you back and forth from Boston every week. So he came down and he worked for us for a while. And we were friendly. We didn't hang out. We were friendly, and I got to know him a little bit. And then obviously, he had a lot of success in WWE by the time I got there. This is where I'm going to get myself in trouble a little bit. Well, not really, because I don't give a shit, so it doesn't matter. But Triple H was forced upon the audience. He's a very good talent. He's a student of professional wrestling in real life. He really is a student of the art in every aspect of it. But I never thought of him as a really great talent. And I've said this before in interviews, and I think even in my first book, that Triple H he had this character, whether he was a heel or a babyface, the character was exactly the same. Now, as a heel, he would be more of a chicken and run and hide, but his entrance is the same. He came out and he poured water on himself, trying to get spitted up in the air, same music. He had that hero entrance as a babyface, and he had that same hero entrance as a heel. There really wasn't that much difference in his character, in the way he told his story in the ring, in my opinion. But Vince loved him because Paul was such a student of the game. Vince decided, I'm going to make him a star. And he did. But of all the talent in WWE that are memorable, Triple H had a lot of great matches because he was kind of forced down everybody's throat. It was positioned against all of the other big talent. But in my opinion, he was only about 80% of a lot of the people that he worked with in terms of a character, because there just wasn't enough depth to his character. But he was easy to work with. He was always polite. He was always professional. I never had an issue with him. Till now.
He's retired, it's fine. So one of the things, thank you very much, one of the things going into your run that people would not have expected is you working not only against Steve Austin at No Way Out 2003, but also becoming like a double act on Raw as the co-general managers. Because you fired him via FedEx, obviously.
In real life.
In real life. And he was very upset about it. It became part of the narrative. So by 2003, he's about to come back. You guys are going to have this match at No Way Out. Talk about the idea of finding out you're going to work with him, first seeing him, and how you guys decide to make it work.
Yeah, that's a very interesting story. Steve Austin had an argument with Vince McMahon. They argued over something creatively, and Steve Austin walked out on a Monday Night Raw. Just said, "Fuck it, I'm going home." Went back to Texas and quit. And Steve had been off for quite a while, and Vince wanted Steve to come back. And Steve had been gone, I think, for a year. I don't know. I don't remember how long it was, but it was quite a while. And somebody, I don't know whose idea it was, but somebody had this idea of, let's bring Steve Austin back and have him involved in a storyline with Eric Bischoff based on the fact that I fired him when he was in WCW. So Bruce Pritchard was the first one. I'm sure it came from Vince first, and then Vince told Bruce to go run it by Eric and see how Eric feels about it, just get my reaction. And Bruce came to me and he goes, "What do you think about working a storyline with you and Steve Austin?" He said, are you comfortable doing that? Because Steve Austin had created this backstory for years after I fired him. He went to ECW and he got all of his heat in ECW by making fun of me and calling me out for firing him. And just, Steve got himself over by making fun of Eric Bischoff. So people thought that there was this real heat between us, including Vince and Bruce. So Bruce came up to me one night after TV, and we were literally walking out of the building on our way to go back to the hotel. And Bruce pulled me off and goes, "Hey, can I talk to you?" And I said, "Sure, what's up?" He goes, "Hypothetically, what would you think if maybe there was an opportunity for you to work with Steve Austin?" yeah, it'd be awesome. I don't want you to worry about him getting physical with you. And I went, I'm not worried about that. If Steve wants to do it, I'm in, because he's such a great performer. It was a great opportunity. He said, okay, and I told Bruce that night, I said, absolutely, I'm 100% in, because this wasn't about me doing things backstage with him, this was about me getting in the ring with him. That they gave me a little more consideration when it came to getting in the ring, because I'm not a wrestler, never was. So when I said, sure, I'm in, 100%. So then we came up with this idea of, Vince came to me and goes, oh, you have to bring in Steve Austin and get him back under contract or you're fired. So I had to go to Texas and hunt for Steve Austin creatively, right? If you remember those segments. And I went into bars in these little towns and I, dressed up like a, city slicker, and I'm going into these country towns in Texas, and it was funny, comical. And one of the scenes that we were supposed to do was in this little bar in a really small town in Texas. And I had not seen Steve Austin for years up until that moment. And I'm in this bar, and I look, and this guy's coming down the stairs. I said, that's Steve Austin. He came over to the bar where I was shooting this scene, and he pulled me aside, and we had a great conversation, and he said, kid, I don't blame you. I would have fired me if I were you. I don't blame you. And ultimately, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I would have never become Stone Cold Steve Austin if you wouldn't have fired me. And I'm grateful for the way things turned out, and I hope we can be friends. That was that, until we had a match. And we did all the stuff we did, the redneck triathlons, and to this day, who the first person to call me when I was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame? Was Stone Cold Steve Austin. We're still friends to this day.